Okay, now we're doing Module 2 right now in Essential Christian Doctrine 2. So that means we're moving from theological anthropology, where we finished looking at what we are in the sense of the constitution for human beings, which is, we're body, soul, spirit, intellect, will, emotions, heart, all of that, what it means, and what the duties of mankind are, being in the ontological and functional image of God. And ultimately, what we're supposed to be doing is mirroring the intertrinitarian, loving, righteous fellowship. That's what we were made for in God's ontological and functional image. Unfortunately, now we move to the next category, is that while God says, "Be holy, for I am holy," here's the problem. We're not holy, okay? We blew it. And that's why we sin. We have a sinful nature, and we do actual acts of sin that have consequences, because being made in the image of God, we are made to, again, have righteous fellowship, to have blessedness, to have peace, to have shalom and community with God and our fellow human beings. But sin affects that in many, many ways. And as we begin our study of the doctrine of sin, one way to summarize all of this is to say this: everyone knows this: things are not the way they are supposed to be. We all have an idea, which is essentially what? The law written in our hearts, that there is a standard of right and wrong, there's a standard of righteousness, and that everybody violates it all the time. Our conscience bears witness that we do it. We know that the way other people treat us in a sinful way, that it's quite unpleasant. So all of that is how to understand the doctrine of sin, because we look at this, again, I have a handout, my syllabus on Hamartiology, and the Greek word hamartia just means missing the mark or sin. Talk about some of these key words in a minute, but ultimately, the doctrine of sin is going to set us up for Christology, because what we're going to do, when all is said and done looking at the doctrine of sin, we're going to look at the results and what happens to human beings as a result of sin, and that will set up the requirements or the job description for a Savior. If human beings are going to be saved at all, then this Savior will have to accomplish certain things to save us. Hence, he will have to have the certain qualifications to accomplish these things to save us. That's the logic of the system. It's human beings made for what we're supposed to be. We didn't fulfill the requirements. There's certain consequences for it. And then we look at the Savior, who in fact is qualified to save us. And then the doctrine of the atonement, we look at the work of Christ, saying that he actually does the work to save us. And then after that, we're going to look at the concepts of, now how do we take this work of Christ and actually get it applied to sinners to change our relationship with God and our very nature so that we are the way we are supposed to be. So that's where we're going theologically with the rest of the semester, and then we'll wrap things up with ecclesiology and eschatology, the doctrine of the church and the doctrine of last things. But for now, as we consider the doctrine of sin, on page 1 of the handout, Old Testament, New Testament words, the most often used words, which are in the New Testament, we have hamartia. In the Old Testament, the word chatha. Both of them ultimately mean missing the mark, and they really do have a concept of it being an archery term, where the fact is we're supposed to hit the bullseye, and when you miss the bullseye, you've missed the mark, okay? Now remember, what's our mark at issue here? Our mark is holiness. Again, why? Because we're designed to be blessed, happy, when we're righteous and loving to one another and to God. When we sin, we break that relationship and we cause harm to the relationship. So hence we've missed the mark in that way. And a lot of these secondary words for sin are simply the result of what happens when we miss the mark. For example, in the Old Testament, avah means to be bent, crooked, or perverse, okay? Or shagah, to err. Aval, to lack the lack of integrity or righteousness. See, all of these ultimately are the result of missing the mark in the first place. Same thing with the New Testament words, parabasis, passing over a line or transgression, or skip down a little bit, anomia, talk about being lawless, that we don't keep the righteousness and justice and law of God. And so all of this means it comes back to the most general thing. Things are not the way they're supposed to be, and there are negative consequences for it. So here's a couple of theological definitions of sin to get us started. Those are the biblical words. But Westminster Shorter Catechism says, sin is any want of conformity unto or transgression of the law of God. Okay? So next, in Berkhof's systematic theology, it says, sin is a lack of conformity to the moral law of God in either act, disposition, or state. And then Buswell's systematic theology says, anything in the creature which is not expressed or which is contrary to the holy character of the Creator. So most definitions of sin, again, in the evangelical Protestant world, are going to be similar to this. But notice that all of them start with, it's a lack of conformity to something, okay? Which is what? Is that we are designed to be hedonists. We're designed to really want to be happy and blessed. The problem is we're not happy because we're not holy. So that's where it all starts. And then, well, how are we not holy? Well, in our very acts that we do. See, we lack conformity to actual actions, okay, for holiness, either positively or negatively. We do things that we shouldn't be doing, and we don't do the things that we should be doing, okay? So, we can look at that and how those are degrees of sin and what's negligent and what's a positive act, but we can look at some of these later. But also attitudes. You may not engage in a particular overt physical act, but you can have an attitude of hatred and malice that's improper. Okay, that's also contrary to holiness. And from these bad attitudes, okay, you can, bad inclinations with malice, what happens now? Now you formulate actions of everything from lying, cheating, murder, rape, robbery, things like that. And then, of course, by nature itself, as we mentioned at the end of Anthropology, texts like Jeremiah 17:9 says, the heart of man is evil and incurably sick. Who can understand it? And we went through that and explained that the heart is the core orientation of the human being. It's literally a governing disposition that's going to drive your intellect, your will, and your emotions. So if you have a self-centered nature, your heart is curved in on itself with the resulting concupiscence or strong desire to sin, frankly, your deliberations and thoughts are going to be sinful. Your choices are going to be sinful and so forth. So that's why ultimately, if you look at the Bible, and like I said, when you're preaching and teaching, guess what? The entire Bible, okay, with the exception of 4 chapters, the first 2 and the last 2, have really one theme, and that is fixing the sin problem with human beings so that righteousness is restored and we can start acting and living as God intended us to live. Literally from Genesis 3 to Revelation 19, all of it has to do with fixing the sin problem with the human race. So this is why if in your theology you're not focusing on that, then you've got some other focus than what God has for studying theology. The fact is, you should be striving to live holy, godly lives and to get rid of sin because it hurts your relationship with God and it hurts other people as well as hurting your character and hurts your blessedness and your happiness in life. So at this point, again, check your heart, check your mind, choose this day whom you're going to serve. The fact is, do you want to, in fact, pursue holiness and be more like Jesus Christ and be conformed to his image? Or you're going to stay in your, in your Christian life where you're constantly having these conflicts and lack of security and things like that. So again, make a choice to want to be more holy and to improve your Christian life, and you'll do it. In the next section, I'm going to start thinking about and examining concepts of righteousness and justice and the law of God, because the Bible from beginning to end simply talks about righteousness and justice and the law of God. So we're going to have talk about the essence of what is righteousness and what is sin in the next segment. Thanks.